obvious step towards making the Lancaster airworthy. So this Lancaster NX611 just Jane is currently a taxiing condition, and we're working towards making her into an airworthy condition, obviously with a view to her flying as well. So last year we did a complete paint strip of the aircraft and a survey of the airframe to see what work would need to be done to make her airworthy, and this is effectively year one with the work starting to make her airworthy. So how we're choosing to work the project is we taxi the Lancaster during the summer periods, raise the money to then spend in the winter on the restoration work. So we've got to take all parts of the project in a bite-sized form. So this winter we're working on the starboard side of the aircraft. We have the starboard fin and rudder removed for a complete rebuild. We have the starboard inner engine removed, the subframe removed, and the undercarriage support beams removed as well for inspection and restoration work. So a few of the parts you'll see off the aircraft, we have the starboard undercarriage, they've got oleo legs, along with the radius arms and retraction arms, which retract the undercarriage into the engine nacelle bay. We've also got the jacks that retract the wheel as well. Then you've got the undercarriage balances, so they're the doors that close around the undercarriage as well. All the cowlings are behind us. We have the starboard inner engine on its power plant stand directly behind us, and then you'll see various other parts which I'll talk about very shortly. So the first few weeks of the restoration work is really removing parts off the aircraft that we are going to restore, and removing bits to get to the parts that we need to get to. So the starboard inner engine was removed, after that the bulkhead, subframe, and then the undercarriage support beams were removed. The main work we're doing there is NDT of the subframe, and then NDT, eddy current and inspection of the undercarriage support beams. I'll show you one of the beams around the other side, but the support beam is basically a forged item which is basically translate the shock of landing back to the main spar. So it's a huge forged item which the subframe bolts to for the engine, and also the undercarriage bolts to, which then in turn bolts to the spar. So it takes all the strength of the spar around the aircraft, and the support beams take it down to the undercarriage and the inboard engines as well. Some parts you'll see down here. This is one section of the starboard inner bulkhead. The bulkhead's in three sections. Jim's working on the lower section just there as well. So at the moment we've completely cleaned those down, paint stripped them, and they're going off to repaint this afternoon. We'll be back with us next week. An awful lot of parts fit the bulkheads there. Some of the parts are here. So we have the oil drainage tank there, pneumatic valves, some of the pipes, hydraulic and oil pipes, feathering pump here, some of your throttle mechanisms, your oil and water traps there. So all those parts obviously stripped off the bulkheads. Each individual part goes away to be cleaned, painted, then all drawn back together, new bolts, new washers, new nuts, all put back together again and in an airworthy condition. Okay, so we make our way around to the starboard side of the aircraft. Okay, so this is the side where you can see the most work has taken place. We've also got the trailing edge removed from the main wing section as well, which I'll talk about very shortly. But you can see the starboard fin and rudder have been removed from this side, so there would originally have been a large fin and rudder hung off the side of the tailplane just here. They were last week on these two jigs and looked like that. They now look like that. They're all in boxes. So had you come last week you'd have seen them on the jigs, but coming this week they are now in component pieces. So the main aim for those two items is to have them completely overhauled to airworthy condition. In order to do that we have to strip everything off, so all the rivets, all the ribs, the formers, everything have to come apart, individually inspected, cleaned, painted, put back together again. One of the main problems with an aircraft of this age is a mag alloy rivet. So they're rivets that have a percentage of magnesium in them, because over time they will just completely degrade, crumble away, and they need replacing. So what we've decided to do with these, we're going to do the job, and we're going to do it once, and we're going to do it properly. So the item comes off, completely stripped away, every single rivet replaced, put back together again. So the rudder and fin are made up of items like this. These are your formers, your ribs. They've got lightning holes in them to reduce the weight but keep the strength, and all the holes of course is rivets. The rudder alone has 3,000 rivets in it. The fin will have more because it's a much bigger structure. So they basically the strength of it is interlocking parts. So you've got your ribs there, and you've got some stronger pieces like this, which form the kind of the spine of it, the spar of the fin and rudder themselves. And they're all riveted together. Some of the worst items, an item like this, which I'll pass round, that's yet to be cleaned up, but you can see traces of corrosion on it. We've found the fin to be in slightly better condition than the rudder, although there are more bits to replace on the fin than there are on the rudder. Just generally the rudder seems to be in slightly worse condition, much greater levels of corrosion and much more of it than there is on the fin. I think that's probably because it's a little bit more open in the rudder, with the attachment points onto the fin itself, the hinge points. The air seems to be able to get in a lot more around it. Also, there seems to be a lot less paint on the inside of the rudder than what there was on the fin. But I'll pass that round for you to have a look at. So that's been completely removed, all the rivets drilled out, and then any part associated with that item is then wire locked back to it, so it can all be traced. What we do when we remove an item from the fin or rudder is we tag it. So on this you'll see there's a small tag which basically has the part number on it. So each item is tagged so we know where it came from and where it's got to go back again. That itself has been glass bead blasted, so a very fine glass bead to remove any corrosion on the surface of the item itself. It also gives an awfully good surface for the paint to then key to. So I'll pass that around as well. That's off the rudder. Yeah, it's all aluminium. It was originally Alclad, which is like a coating that's put on it, which is why they differ in colour as much as the fact they've been bead blasted.
Are these parts original to the wartime?
Yep, absolutely. These are what they were built with. And we found as we've gone through it, there have been some alterations made to the items during its service, most likely when the French were using it in the 50s and 60s. Some repairs that haven't necessarily been done to the book. So slightly thicker material, slightly thicker gauge used where it should have been thinner, various repairs which you wouldn't do now but obviously were deemed suitable out in the field in the 50s and 60s. And through the very nature of the production of the item, when you take it apart you find rivets where the outer skin has been riveted over the ribs, have cut through another rivet, and things as soon as you take it off it's not airworthy because something's happened where it wouldn't be allowed, but because it's happened during production it's just been signed off and it's okay, but as soon as you take it apart you know it's not. One of the main reasons for starting on the fins as soon as we have done, so the first year one, is the fact that they've got a wooden leading edge. The leading edge is made of laminated wood, so there's thin pieces of wood like that, all formed and shaped and glued together. That should be glued to about another 4 or 5 pieces of lamination. The wood itself is the original, so it's 70 years old. It was originally mahogany. It's all started delaminating, the wood's falling apart, it's all rotting, so I'll pass that around. So the main reason really to start as early as we have is the leading edge of the fins are just falling apart, which means that in turn the skins are coming off the fins, they're vibrating, they'll crap along the rivet lines, and it'll all just need replacing anyway. So we've decided to start on this section first and work our way forward really. An awful lot of the wood that should be in one section is in many, which you'll see on the top here. And I referred earlier to the undercarriage support beam. This is an undercarriage support beam, rather heavy. The flat face at the back here is what bolts to the spar itself. The lower lug here on the front is what the subframe attaches to, and the upper lug there the subframe attaches to, and then the one at the back here is where the undercarriage bolts to it as well. It's made of a magnesium alloy. It's rather heavy, but it's also quite strong. The problem with these is if there's anything wrong with these, they're going to be awfully difficult to replace. The Canadian Lancaster that flies, VRA, at Hamilton in Canada, they had one of these crack and it cracked straight through the beam here, and that's from a very heavy landing. We've not found anything like that on this the beam here. It's quite a rough surface, it's actually a forged item, so there's peaks and there's troughs in it, which could look like corrosion, but it's actually just the rough nature of the metal itself. It's got holes in the web here, that's basically to reduce the weight of it, but it keeps the strength. Just here we've got a camshaft. So that's the top camshaft on the V, so there's one on the obviously left, one on the right, outboard and inboard of the engine. Those lugs themselves actually suffer from deterioration due to the cam followers that rub along them. You'll find the cam followers, bits will flake off them, which then scores the cam lobe itself and generally wears it down. So we've gone through a sort of modifications on our engines which modify the cam follow itself to put a carbide tip on it. So that is a much harder material, which is actually a bit better for the cam itself because it doesn't flake off, it doesn't have bits that flake which then score the cam. So doing that modification to the followers actually saves the cams themselves. A camshaft you could easily pay about £4 grand for. And as soon as you've gone through that hard coating on the outside, it's very soft metal on the inside, and it does soon wear it down. About £4 grand for a cam, yeah.
Can you get the cams reprofiled if they do that?
No. They did try making some new cams a few years ago, but they found they couldn't actually make them as hard as the originals, and they just started wearing very easily. A few more items to show you. This is part of the rudder. Again, it's all these component parts rivet to this single plate here, so they're all wire locked together. Pass this round because you can see what kind of a disease corrosion is, what it actually does to the metal. So looking at that one there, you see how it's eaten away the metal. So that's corrosion on the aluminium. That's what we're combating with the aircraft. What we found is when we open these two items up, there's very little paint actually on the inside, so there's no real barrier against the air and the moisture. So it's not really protected the aircraft from corrosion. Of course, these items were made in 1945 and they're expected to last a few years, and then either the aircraft would be scrapped or it would have been shot down and destroyed anyway. So it's lasted a lot longer than it was ever expected to. Another item to show you is the ancillary panels. This is the priming panel from the starboard side. So there's a photo of it here before it was removed. It sits between the undercarriage legs on the back side of the undercarriage, just above at the back of the subframe. So this is one of the first items that's nearing completion of its restoration. So again, it's been completely stripped down, everything cleaned up, repainted where it's needed, and then attached back to the panel. There's various things we haven't painted because of the originality of them, want to keep the aircraft as original as possible. So this here is just a cover from electrical connections inside, which hasn't had any attention, really just cleaned up. We're just waiting for some brackets off here which have gone for repair, to be re-welded and cleaned up, and then this oil and water trap will be reconnected properly. A few things on here. You've got your priming cocks for the priming of the inboard and outboard engine on the starboard side. There was another fuel cock here which allowed you to put a different sort of fuel in for starting on very cold mornings. Main electrical connection. You've got your top for your pneumatic system, your little Kai gas primer, so that's what you actually use to prime the engines. You unscrew it and then pump, and it's 5 pumps after pressure for a warm day, 15 for a cold day. Then you've got your hydraulics here as well to do hydraulic tests on the aircraft. You plug in an outside hydraulic rig and pressurise the system and use that rig for actually testing the undercarriage to go up and down, the bomb doors, and various other hydraulic parts of the aircraft. So that's almost ready to go back on when the subframe and undercarriage go back on, and that will just sit in stores waiting to be reattached when everything else is ready for it. Inside the Lancaster we've been doing a bit of work as well. So the floor of the Lancaster from the H2S section backwards has been lifted. That's for us to do a bit of work on the inside, have a bit of inspection of the floor, see if there's any corrosion setting in, see what sort of condition it's in, and also for us to fit some anchor nuts around the H2S dome here where the dome actually fits on. So what I'll do is I'll turn the lights on the inside for you to have a look at the floor of the aircraft. Trailing edges have been removed from the aircraft. We've got the inboard trailing edge and the outboard trailing edge. We did a little bit of work to these last year in the replacement of the anchor nut strips that hold the panels on. We've got that work to do to the outboard section this year. So we removed them from the aircraft. They're held on by hundreds of little studs. So if you see at the top and the bottom of the section there, those brown studs that stick out from the spar, each one of those has got a nut on which holds on the trailing edge sections. So of course all those had to be undone. The seal broken between the spar web and the trailing edge, and then it's removed and dropped down from the aircraft. So we've got these to thoroughly inspect. You can see inside the actual structure of the trailing edge when it's on its side, so all that's going to be inspected. We're inspecting the channel that actually neighbours the spar web. There are a few sections that we know need some attention, there's some corrosion, so we're going to have to cut a section out and splice a section in. So all those will be checked. It's really, removing this is for a survey aspect of this winter as opposed to much corrective work. But while they're off, we'll replace all the anchor nut strips that are on the inside of the trailing edge on the outboard section. And we're also inspecting the rear spar and web section. So when you talk about the spar of the aircraft, people tend to expect a big I-beam that stretches from one side to the other. It's not quite like that. The Lancaster main spar is made up of 4 spar booms and 2 spar webs. So what you look back when you see the red of the back of the wing there, that's actually what you're looking at is the spar web. So that's a sheet of thick aluminium which is then bolted through to 2 spars, so the top spar and the bottom spar. The spar is basically a boom of aluminium extrusion in a C shape, top and bottom, joined by the web between. So that's the rear and the front. So what you're looking at there is the rear face of the web of the rear spar. That's mirrored at the front, so the 2 C sections look at each other and you've got a fuel tank in between. So that red that you can see on it is a preservative. That was put on in the 1970s when the aircraft was taken apart, moved to RAF Scampton and put back together again to sit as a gate guardian. At that point they'd removed the trailing edges for transport and they sprayed this red in, which is actually, we call it ox blood. It's actually an oil preservative which clings to the material, then sets a bit like a rubbery substance. So that's all going to be removed. The spar web is going to be inspected. It's all going to be repainted. All of the studs will be cleaned up, ready for the trailing edge to go back on. But all of those studs have to be replaced. So when we actually work on the trailing edge and the wing section, all of those studs will be replaced. And they're all slightly different lengths. The stud itself, the edge the stud that comes out towards us are all the same length, but the stud that goes through the spar on the inside are different lengths, because the spar itself wastes away as it gets to the wingtip, so it's ever decreasing in thickness. So all those studs are different lengths. So there will be a period when we actually have to get up inside and have a look and measure the individual studs to order the set amount for the replacement of them. Sorry? There's an awful lot to do, yeah. That's why they say, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is a bite at a time. So it's a huge aircraft, a lot of rivets, a lot of parts, but all has to be examined, cleaned, inspected, replaced where needed and put back together again. So that's why we're doing it over winter periods. We're taking it a bite at a time. So next winter the opposite will be done. So the port side will have the inboard engine and the carriage and everything removed, the port fin and rudder will be removed and the same job done. The year after that we're looking at doing the rear fuselage section, and then we're just going to work through it a piece at a time, and by the time we finish the whole aircraft will be airworthy and all be signed off. One thing the CAA want, who's the governing body, is they want a work pack for each job each year. So at the end of this year there'll be a pack of work packs which will go to the CAA, they'll inspect it, look at it, when they're happy with it they'll effectively sign it off, and that's year 1 done. What they don't want is 10 years of work all landing on their desk at one time saying, right, we're ready, can we fly? They want to see it as it progresses, they want to inspect things as it goes, make sure the material substitutions are all correct, make sure they're happy with all the stress calculations, everything like that, and they can correct things as they go, they can come back to us and give their feedback on what we're doing, and they also can trace everything that we're doing all the way through. If they have a question over something, they'll come back to us and we've got to prove why we've done it, the material we've used, everything like that. So it's a huge body of work, this restoration. It's not just replacing a rivet, it's what rivet have you used, who made the rivet, what material was it made from, where did it originally come from. You've got to pass that trail all the way through to original manufacture, so the CAA can ask you about the rivet that you put in the trailing edge, number 4 from the left, show me the paperwork as to where that came from, and I want to know who made it originally. So they need to know every fine little detail all the way through. They say once the paperwork weighs as much as the aircraft, it's about ready to fly. It won't be far off, so 19 tons of paperwork later, the aircraft will be ready.
When do you think, if everything goes to plan, when do you think it might be?
It's looking at total, if we carry on as we are, doing section by section, about a 10-year project. Unless we get a big impulse of cash which says, don't worry taxiing that year, do the wings, then it's going to, might alter things slightly. But at the moment, every penny that's spent is hard earned through taxiing, operating with the museum, Rivet Club donations, anything you buy in the shop will then go and fund the Lancaster. So we don't unfortunately have a big pot of £4 million that we just keep taking from. Every pound we spend has been earned that previous sort of job, and then the work pack is signed off by the signing engineer. So as you look back at this section, this is where the undercarriage was, the inboard engine was. You can see where the balances were attached to the aircraft. So as you look at the front face of the web of the front spar, you'll see there's two big bolts that stick out the bottom. That's the bottom attachment for the undercarriage support beam. And then there's a further, I think it's 8 or 10 bolts that run up the spar web until you get to the very top hole, which is where the top bolt goes through. It's the top of the support beam through into the top spar. See all the little bolts or smaller bolts between the two big ones that run through left to right, and they all hold the web to the spar itself. So the spar is peppered with holes and bolts as it goes through, holding the structure of the aircraft together. A few things on there. The box on the just slightly right of centre is the throttle controls. So they come from the throttle quadrant under the bomb bay, up to the spar, across the front of the spar to that box, and then in turn to the engine. Left of that is some of the electrics for the starting and the electrics for the engine, and then just to the left of that there's another set of control chains which you can see, and they transfer the throttle controls to the outboard engine as they run through the leading edge to the outboard engine. When you look at number 4 engine there, you see all the light green, so the bearers themselves have been overhauled, painted, the bulkhead's all been done, the oil tank and the subframe there has all been done. So how that engine looks will be how number 3 will look when we put it back on. So we're working through the aircraft section by section. So that's about where we are. We've got to have it all completed and finished for engine tests in mid-April, for taxiing at the end of April, start of May. So quite a lot to do. When all these items go off the paint this afternoon and come back, we'll eventually stop taking things apart and start putting things back together again. So we're precipice of a hill coming up, and we'll be on our way down again very shortly. Hopefully the items will go off to NDT next week, so the subframe and the undercarriage support beams will be NDT. Hopefully they'll pass, and then they can all be painted up and put back on. Trailing edges will be done probably about a month's time, and the fin and rudder will start being put back together again probably about a fortnight's time, when everything's been cleaned, inspected, painted, and then can be riveted back together. So yeah, quite a long project. Any questions?
That one's all been done, is it? That one's
Yep, bar the engine bearers, that's all completely airworthy. On the inside, the cowlings need work, but everything on the inside is all done. Okay, well thank you very much for joining us and listening to me waffle on. Thank you for your support of the project as well. Every pound you spent on this, so thank you very much. By all means, have a good